Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. This review is brought to you in part by Rogers Hobby Center in Saginaw, Michigan, where the fun begins. This review covers the Coca-Cola 77 Ford delivery van. It's an AMT kit number 1173. It's a 125 scale item, and it has 115 pieces molded in white, chrome, 2 clear sprues and 2 clear red sprues, as well as 1 green tinted sprue. Now there are also 4 red striped vinyl tires. Now this body style from the Ford van was produced between 75 and 78, and it came with many options, including the delivery van version. Now the kit was first produced by AMT in 1977, and it's gone through nearly a dozen reboxings. The current kit is an AMT reboxing with new parts and Coke livery decals. It also includes a vending machine, and the van itself is about 7.5 inches long, 3.5 inches wide, and 3.5 inches high. And the vending machine is about 3.25 inches tall when you're completed with your models. Oh, hey, yes, what is it, Newt?
I've seen vans like that delivering Coke to local gas stations.
That's for sure. And you'll see them wherever Coca-Cola is sold, but sometimes they're used by salespeople too.
Are they always red and white?
Those are Coke's registered trademark colors, but I've seen their vehicles in all white with red lettering too, so they look completely different. Either way, there's no mistaking a Coke company van. Here are the contents of the kit. As you can see, there's quite a few pieces for this model. It also has the green Coke bottles for the cases that come along with it, and a Coke machine. So it's a fun kit, and the Coke livery decals are quite extensive. But please use caution when using any of the products you see here used in the review, and follow the manufacturer's safety and use guidelines. Now those decals, some of them are pretty large, and you may find that some setting solutions that are available for those might help the decals conform to the body contours a little bit better. Another thing that you'll notice about this 70s era mold is that there are going to be some issues. For example, when they first started putting out some of these kits, they did not put the part numbers on the sprues next to the parts. So you'll have to use our video and the instructions to recognize the parts by shape for construction. But it starts with the engine, and so all the parts need to be cleaned up. There's pin marks, they're pretty heavy, and seam lines and flash, but it'll give you something to do on a Saturday afternoon. Just use your hobby knife and sandpaper to smooth it all out, and test fit every 2 pieces before you put them together. First thing I did was glue the engine transmission halves together, then the heads of the intake and valve covers. Now attach the distributor, the oil pan, timing chain, cover belts, the alternator, which is chrome, and the fan and oil filter. And I used some Testors dark blue and silver enamels to paint these parts with a fine brush. And I didn't need to use primer on these smaller pieces. They cover pretty well. Now we can add some more details by painting the exhaust manifolds rust color. Now the belts, pulleys, fan, the air cleaner, and the hoses are painted with some rubber black. The distributor and fan accents get painted gray, and then you can use some enamels over acrylics for the base, and that way you can clean off the enamel mistakes if you make any with some paint thinner, and it won't bother the acrylic underneath. I also then, after assembly, I gave a little black wash to the parts to accentuate the details and the highlights. Next, we're going to work on the frame, and some of these parts are actually numbered, the bracing on the floor of the body. But gather the frame, the rear axle halves, the springs, the gas tank, the exhaust pipes, the braces for that, the floor, and the shocks. And we're going to glue the axle halves together, and note that mine was broken on the one end, but that just glues to the other half, so just butt it up there to the other piece and glue it back into position if you find something like that. Now, Then you're going to glue the braces to the floor and then the frame to the floor. Now you can assemble the tanks and the springs, followed by the rear axle and the shocks. And I use some slow setting glue, for the shocks, and that way they'll just stay in position long enough to trap them in the bosses where they're installed. Now we can gather up the front suspension pieces shown, and then we're going to clean those up. The springs with the I-beams and the radius arms attach well, but the placement of the shocks and the steering linkage is a little bit vague. You'll need to test fit these where they should go, and then use the photographs here to help with placement there. The front wheels can be slightly posed in a turn at this point if you want to. Just be sure that the angle of both tires are in the same direction, and then make sure that the spring height is the same on both sides to ensure the van sets properly. At the next stage here, we'll be cleaning up the parts for the engine compartment. Now we're going to glue the interior firewall to the interior tub on the outside of that, and there's some tabs there in the firewall to aid with placement in a vertical fashion, but you have to make sure that it's centered just by making sure it doesn't stick out of either side. So then next we will glue the heater box, the brake booster, and the master cylinder into place on the other side of the firewall, and then the steering box and the shaft. They're a little difficult to place positively, so use the photos here to help and the instructions if you can. The next thing I did was spray the interior with a white primer. I use a product called Stenolrez through an airbrush. I also painted the bottom of the frame and the underside there with some flat black. I use the same product. It works pretty good for me. You'll notice that I had built the entire suspensions, for strength, because raw plastic glues in stronger bonds than painted plastic. So at this point, we're going to have to cut the exhaust where it's hidden underneath the transmission crossmember there, and then we're going to glue the engine into the front on its mounts there with some super glue. Next, we're going to attach the front part of the exhaust to the manifolds to the cross member there together, and then finally we're going to attach the rear portion of the exhaust to the chassis assembly and the cross member in the back. At step 5 here, we're going to remove the wheel parts, the drive line, the radiator battery reservoir, the radiator cap, and the rear bumper from the sprues, and get those cleaned up of any sprue marks or parting lines. And the tires, they're great. They're red lines, and these must be out of the AMT parts pack. And if you want the tires to turn in place, the back side of the rim goes fully onto the axles, and then place the retaining ring on the axle. So push it fairly tight against the rim and glue the retaining ring to the end of the axle only. Don't get it on the rim. Continuing our work on the wheels and rims here, we're going to use one of the chrome parts of the rim, and we're going to glue that to the back side of the rim only, and not get glue on the retaining ring of the axle, or the wheels won't spin. So you're going to scrape all the plating off, and then use some good model glue there for adhesion, and glue the drive line between the transmission and the rear axle. Next we'll work with radiator bits here, so glue the battery and the reservoir to the radiator support. Then glue that to the front of the engine compartment. Next, glue the upper radiator hose and radiator cap to the radiator. And since the tires are hollow, they can just be pushed over on the assembled rims after they have dried. And then finally, glue on the rear bumper into place, and it has a nice alignment marks there to do that. The interior is up next, so gather and clean up all the interior pieces. There's plenty of injector pin marks in the armrests, the steering columns, and other pieces. And when I assembled the two halves of the seats, there were some pretty large seams on the back side. I thought they might be visible through the back windows, so I filled those with some automotive glazing putty and sanded them smooth. Next, I painted the interior with the Tamiya light gray. It's XF66, except for the cargo area, which is a gloss white. That's Tamiya X2. Now, I detailed the dash, steering wheel, and column with some black and some silver enamel highlight. And now glue in the dash, column, steering column, and the wheel, and then also the AC box. Next, glue the assembled seats to the interior floor. I used silver, gray, and black enamels to detail the engine compartment. And the center of the seats and the door trim got a Tamiya black panel wash, but any fine 50/50 black wash will work. Now, the door and the window handles got painted with some silver as well. Time to work on the body, so remove any flash or any pin marks and parting lines from the body and the hood. And then I sprayed the entire body and hood with some black primer. And then I painted the top and the interior of the body with some white primer. I sprayed the white areas next with a Tamiya X2 gloss white. And now we'll do some masking by masking off the interior roof and engine compartment. And I used Tamiya tape for the edges and the tight spots, and then cover the rest with painter's masking tape, some low adhesive pressure sensitive tape. Next, I painted the body and the hood with some Tamiya X7 gloss red, a few fine mist coats to get it started, and then some heavier coats until you get a good even coating over the entire surfaces. Now, after the paint dries thoroughly, you can place on the decals, and I suggest some setting solution. I use the Microsol product, and when the decals are set, you clear coat the body with your favorite clear coat. While the clear coat on the body was drying, I used some of the panel wash, black wash, to detail the grille. And also, I detailed the undercarriage with some rust, gray, and silver tones. Now that all the masks had been removed, I painted the chrome trim with a molotov pen, and then I used some flat black enamel to paint the window rubber seals. After the paint has dried, glue the windows in with some Testors clear part cement. And after test fitting the body and thinning the bottom of the windshield to the maximum without being visible from the outside, I found that it would now fit down to the frame in front without removing the dash and the firewall piece. So I decided to give the van a slight body lift, and I glued the rear of the body 3/16 inch above the frame and the front body a 1/4 inch above the frame, and then I glued the front bumper on a bit higher to the frame to match the body lines. The finished look is okay, and it kind of looks like it's hauling something, like it's set for a load. So glue on the grille, the mirrors, and touch up the chrome parts with a Molotov pen. The Coke cases were painted brown with some Testors enamels, and then decaled and clear coated with some Pledge floor care. Then the caps were dotted with a X7 gloss red. The Coke machine got painted with some primer, white primer, then an X2 gloss white. And I had a 1/4 inch of the white was masked off on the front of the box, and then the box got painted with the gloss red paint. Now the front of the machine, once again, a little of that black primer, and then the lower front part, a wood grain by, painting it with some light brown and dark brown and streaking it. Next, I placed the decal on the front of the machine and painted the bottom of the machine's a clear gloss white, and then glued it over the decal. Now, I glued the front to the back, and then placed the remaining decals on the machine and clear coated it as well. There were just a couple pieces like these two left over from the kit, and a lot of decals depending on what color you painted the body of your vehicle. But that's about it. All the rest were used. So there you have it. Now this is a challenging kit due to the age of the molds, and of course the parts aren't numbered, so you have to be careful and match those up. This review will certainly help. The instructions will give you a general guide, but if you see the parts going into place, it really helps. Now, I would not recommend this for a beginner, and it's going to take a little extra work with a lot of test fitting to get this to go together properly, but as you can see, it's a real head turner. It looks really gorgeous, and it's an icon of the American fabric, and if I were you, I'd buy one and put it on my shelf. I hope you like this premium step-by-step scale model kit review. So that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can do that by clicking on the icon in the lower right of any of our reviews, or you can find us on Facebook or at our website, rightonreplicas.com. Thanks.